Hello and welcome to Borrow My Belief, a podcast that's designed to inspire you to live from your heart. So we welcome guests that have followed the heart on incredible journeys, extraordinary in the ordinary. And I'm really delighted to have this week's guest, Mary. I noticed Mary's story within a digital marketing group that I'm part of. And straight away, I knew that I wanted her on my podcast and to tell her story because it really is an incredible story. And although thrust upon her, it's very heart led what she's created from it. So, welcome, Mary.
Thank you. That's very kind.
So,
Yeah, it's lovely to be here, and yeah, hopefully my words will resonate on someone's heart. So,
well, I've watched a video that you created because we're part of a 90-day video challenge, aren't we, for practicing? And you definitely captured my heart. And then we had a conversation, and everything that you said in that conversation to me was incredible. So, where to start? I think probably the best thing to do is give an overview of what's happened in your life, to just an overview, and then we can talk about what you've created.
okay. Um, so I raised three beautiful children. They're all adults now. One child lives with a variety of challenges, mental health and others, and carried on with our lives. And we became, I was in a new romantic relationship. I was at the end of my career. My children were raised and launched, and so we're making plans of what do those golden years look like? What does retirement look like? Where shall we travel? Those kind of questions. Um, so about 3 or 4 years into the relationship with with Wes, my daughter had a young baby. No, all babies are young. Had a baby, and the young family came to live in our home, and within weeks and finally months, it was very clear that we we were the best place for Isaac to live short term, which grew longer and longer and became so long term that we made the pledge to him and the commitment to him to raise him to be a wonderful adult. And so there we were in our 50s. Wes was almost 60, and we are with a newborn in our bedroom. This wasn't our first rodeo. We knew what was still to come. He had raised three kids. I had raised three kids. We knew what was still to come, and yet this sweet baby was in our care, and so we are raising him. He's 7.5 now. He has a good relationship with his mom, in that she is a part of his life and is in many respects like a beloved auntie, someone who cares very deeply for him and cares about him and loves him unconditionally, but is happily passes the child over to someone else at the end of the day to do the parenting. And the Isaac's father lives with a number of challenges, including, and sorry, his challenges have now manifested themselves into full-on addiction and living on the streets, and is not part of Isaac's life. And so we are his parents.
Oh, wow. I don't even know where to start because there's so many things that are going through my mind and where to even ask you, and we will unpick all this and work our way through it. And the first thing that comes up for me is I'm a grandparent, and my daughter is young. She had my grandson at 22, and she's single parented. The father was around for the first 4 weeks, but then she's single parented. He does support. And my daughter travels, and for the last 10 weeks, I was very much an integral part of my grandson's life, and then he's gone off. And I've loved that 10 weeks, absolutely loved them. And I really bonded with him, and I'm feeling a lot of grief right now. And at the same time, I cannot imagine what it that was a lot. We lived in the same space, away from each other, but very close. And and it was very intense, and I cannot imagine, even though I've brought up two children myself who are adults, what it would be like. I can kind of imagine, but it would be such a different picture if I then became his partner, not his partner, his parent,
Guardian. Yeah.
yeah, guardian, let alone if I'd only known somebody a few years.
Yeah.
And they were not even my daughter's father. So
Correct.
what I'm thinking there is, oh my goodness, how many discussions or not discussions, because it becomes so busy in newborn in your bedroom. I mean, talk about throw a couple together and say, right, we're in this together. And I can't even imagine what that must have been like for you with, and the grief. There must have been grief involved and so many things.
So many things. And one of the things I hear from what you just expressed of spending 10 intense weeks with your grandchild, lucky, lucky, lucky you.
Yeah.
And um, many of my friends who are now grandparents who in the typical sense get to enjoy those moments, intense moments, or weekly moments, or even daily moments where they're part of the day-to-day of the child. But the nights are very long and difficult. As you remember as a parent, it's the same thing,
Mm,
only we're in our senior years.
yeah.
And we hear stories like yours on the daily, and want to, and I do celebrate with you and have joy in my heart that you have that experience, but it comes with a tear to my heart every time I hear that.
Yeah.
And so grief is there. It's there all the time. Like any loss, it's always part of you. It's then how do you manage that? How do you go through it? And there's many techniques and ways to handle grief, but we can talk about that after. But one of the things that you touched on, of course, is that we were in a new relationship. We were just trying to figure out what our lives looked like. We had made a commitment that we would, we were committed to each other. But that commitment wasn't and hasn't been formalized on a legal basis, although we live by common law. However, he did, we did together, and him specifically, stand up and formalize our commitment to Isaac in the court of law. And that's a pretty big commitment. So as you know, when there is a new life, attachment starts in utero, and then begins once that child is in the world and is attached to their primary caregivers. We were blessed in that Isaac was with us from the very giddy up go. Not all families have that. And so the attachment was there and very strong for both Wes and I. So as we carried on and started raising him, and we looked at what other options might be best for Isaac, including finding any other family, a young family to raise him, or, even we did consider the foster system, adoption system, for a very brief moment. We considered it, but we had to consider all our options. So when it came time to make that commitment, the attachment was there and was deep. Now, not all children who come into the care of their kin, and I'm specifically connecting with grandparents because we have unique situation. There's that generation in between,
Mm.
and a heartfelt generation in between. However, many children who come into the care of someone other than their parents have already experienced some significant trauma. And with that comes, attachment issues and abandonment issues, some developmental issues, a lot of things that Isaac's father experienced, and resulted in him living on the streets.
Mm.
So ultimately, so we want to avoid that. We want Isaac to be the best Isaac that he can be. And so we are blessed in that our attachment to him and his attachment to us started at an extremely young age. He didn't come with withdrawals from a parent or mother who might have been actively using when she had the child. He doesn't come with any developmental delays that he has no developmental delays. Whether he develops, other things as he gets older, we don't know, but he is bright and healthy and stable and all those things. And many children who come into grandparents' homes do not arrive like that.
A minefield, isn't it? And I know we're going to discuss so much more, but what came to my mind there is I did a breathwork certification a few years ago, and it was really in depth and a lot of science, and I came across epigenetics. I don't know if you know anything about
Mhm.
epigenetics.
Yes.
So even you've given him the best chance. And what I was thinking was, we'll talk a minute about the company that you've set up, but because what you've set up is dealing with other families and other situations like what you've just described, really you're educating yourself at the same time through service to others about different things that are giving the best for Isaac as well.
Mhm. For
So,
sure.
I mean, gosh, I can't, minefield doesn't even come close, does
It's
it?
it's so many layers to it. There's so many layers to it, and it's so different than, um, oh, you know, my children have gone to work overseas for 3 months, so I'm caring for the children. Or, um, but they're healthy parents doing their thing. Uh, or when there's a death of a child, now I'm talking about the middle generation, the parent is grieving their child while they're caring for their grandchild who is grieving for their parent.
Mm,
And that very unique situation is heart-wrenching.
mm, yeah.
Many grandparents are parenting children whose parents have either through neglect or um, through mental health challenges, addictions, incarceration, abandonment, have just disappeared. They're not in the child's life. And having to lead and guide those children through some pretty traumatic situations
Mm,
while still loving their own child, angry at their own child, disappointed in their own child, frustrated, estranged, all those things to their baby.
Yeah.
It's tough. It's tough. And it's unique in that we're not like foster parents and we're not like kinship care parents, in that, um, in theory, foster parents come to it from a place of love and love those children and raise those children as best they can. Um, but they are the foster parent, and kinship care givers, bless their hearts, have committed to the children as well, but they're not dealing with that sort of middle
Mm.
piece. And the middle piece is really what, is most challenging, for grandparents. Um, and yeah, so whether that parent is alive, whether that parent is, completely removed from the family due to life choices, illness, that sort of thing, or they are there, as in my situation, on a weekly basis and impacting Isaac on a weekly basis. She is not his parent for reasons. And this past week, or 2 weeks, have been, really, reminded us again why we're doing what we're doing and how we need to rally around and protect Isaac, from unhealthy choices and unhealthy behaviors by a person that he cherishes more than anything.
Do you
And
know,
I cherish more than anything.
yeah,
It's
of
my
course.
daughter making bad choices, right?
Yeah, and you can't, gosh, this, like I said, there's so much, it's a minefield. First of all, you can't enable your daughter. She has to make her own decisions and allow that because it's going to be her choice. How she, what, when it finally comes to move through that. And at the same time, I also wrote down, I lived with, so my story's been quite the story as well, and but very different to yours. I lived with some people I really love for 14 months, and I used to joke that they were like my foster parents. And it's funny because I lived there at 52, right? And they were the same age as me. And I've said that he'll walk me down the aisle that one day. It was just a joke. But as I stayed there, rented a room off them, I learned about fostering because they used to foster. And what was coming up for me when you were talking there was a foster parent goes through a process. Somebody who adopts a child goes through a process. So there's meetings and there's talks and there's preparation and there's learning and there's skills. In your circumstances, it's thrust upon you, really. And I was wondering, because I know what you've gone on to create, and we will talk about it, but I was wondering, how do you equip yourself? What kind of, for you, uniquely you, and you've obviously gone on to understand even other scenarios and what other people's challenges are, but I'm just wondering about your journey and your challenges and where you found support and what you did and how you saw yourself through that.
So uniquely my story. So, my daughter had a significant psychotic break while she was, pregnant and carrying my grandson, and so she was hospitalized. And the, psychiatric team and the obstetrics team worked very closely together to try to figure out the right, medical care for her to bring her out of psychosis and into a place where she could, deliver her child. And during that time, the Ministry of Children and Families, which, I'm not sure what that's what it's called in my province, and every Western country has that caring part of the government system, the social services system, became involved, and we had no experience with that. We had never, in fact, it has a very bad reputation of making a lot of mistakes with children.
Mm.
And so that was very intimidating at the time. And so, as the due date got closer and closer, the discussions came, where will the baby come home to, and to whom will the baby live? With whom will the baby live? And we had, space in our home for, the young family to live. The goal is always to keep a child with their birth parents until it's untenable. And so the very first conversation that I had with a social worker, she said, we want to put a safety plan in so that the baby comes home to you from the hospital. And I kind of said, okay, obviously that's fine. I was very part of her prenatal care as well. And they said, so we'll have to do a police check on you. And I said, no problem. That's not a problem. Have at her. And I said, what about my spouse? And they said, well, what about your spouse? And I said, he's my common law husband, and he'll be in the house. We don't need a criminal check for him. And I went, excuse me? And Wes was beside me and he goes, what? And so that's, our first introduction to the flaws in the system. So there is a non-biological stepdad in the home. Anyway, he had his criminal check. We both passed. It's all good. From that point on, we were a team, and I was no longer the sole person. And so Isaac came home with his parents, and he was down. The social workers visited on the daily. They were well aware of the father's history as a child in care and a youth in care. Um, and they were aware that my daughter was fresh out of the psych ward and has an illness that can escalate postpartum. And so it was carefully monitored. It took, I think, 2 days before Isaac was upstairs and in our bedroom and out of their day-to-day care, and then has never left the house. So what did we have for preparation? You just heard it. What did we come to the table with? Tons of parenting experience and tons of knowledge on child development, but we had to prove that. So the process, it took, once a child is removed, whatever the term is where you live, from the parents and put under the guardianship of the ministry, they have 1 year to place that child in a permanent placement. And during that time is when we had so many visits from child development people, from social workers. We had, it was a 10-page questionnaire to fill out, where they were analyzing us. They were evaluating us. And I understand that, because in many cases, not in many cases, in some cases, less so now than it previously was, it was a generational cyclical thing, that there was dysfunction in the home, and the family of origin for the parent who is struggling was a dysfunctional place, and generationally so. That isn't the case with us, and so we had to prove that. And I understand it's all in the safeguard of the child, but it was like we were defending ourselves the whole way along. Bearing in mind we had no experience with ministry stuff, we just was like, well, we're his grandparents, of course. Of course, I don't understand who's going to love this child more? Why do we? Looking back, I understand a little bit more the paperwork side, but foster parents, adoptive parents, they are offered so many courses in parenting, so many courses in navigating school systems, navigating children with special needs, all of those courses to be good parents. No, we're not funded for that.
Yeah,
So
okay.
do I do it myself? Of course I do.
Right.
But foster parents and adoptive parents, so there's things that we need to change on a systemic level, but that's a whole different story. I can only do what I can to help the grandparents that I know, and sorry, not just the grandparents I know, but the world. But I was desperately searching for some sort of support or community. Everyone goes, oh, there's so many like you. It's like, where are they? They're hidden. Where are these people? So I looked for a group in my community and there wasn't one. And so I got myself trained up. Now I'm a community builder and that's what I am. But in order to run a group under this umbrella, I needed to be trained as a facilitator and so did. And started a group and we were growing on a weekly basis and everything was really great because it allowed grandparents to have a break and to say all the things that they want to say without judgment with to among a group of people who understood. So that was wonderful. I got a lot of fulfillment from that, and the grandparents that uh, were part of the community were building friendships and things were happening. There was a synergy and and then a global pandemic hit, and here we are thrown out again. And
Hmm.
here we are. So, so I got tremendous benefit from finding my peers, and in other parts of my life, other times of my life, I had it as well, and I know that that is the a key component for healing and for being able to navigate things like grief, et cetera, um, disappointment, and the day-to-day challenges too, right? So, because kids come with challenges.
Just
Like the email I got the other day saying, "Did you know that Isaac is bringing candy canes to school and putting them in the pocket, of his coat in the cloakroom, and sneaking off and eating pieces of candy throughout the day?" No, I didn't know that. So is candy the issue? Now, to a parent who's not equipped or not experienced, candy would be the issue. The issue isn't candy. The issue is sneakiness, right?
yeah.
And so, and so starts a whole new, I shouldn't say that. We always talk about sneaky, like, honesty but channeling our parenting to that particular issue. That, if you're a grandma, who is, picking the child up from school, you might know that that sneakiness is happening, but it's not on you. It's on the parents to train that child for. So
Mm.
that's just a little example, but
Yeah. So a few things. It's really interesting. I could hear you say there that you were kind of being grilled for being loving parents. And do you know, my mum had schizophrenia, and when I was born, oh wow,
oh
she
yeah.
she had that severe postnatal depression. So I'm no stranger to mental illness. I grew up with mental illness, and I know they impact. It didn't feel like it had an impact on me as a child, but it's definitely had an impact. Well, it did, but it definitely affected me once I became an adult. And yeah, for me, that's just what I lived with. But a lot of people don't realize what that is. So you were living with that. You were living with being grilled for being the loving people that are stepping in. I mean, gosh, they're also, what country are you in, Mary?
We live in Canada. We live in British Columbia specifically.
So just so the viewers know. And then you were talking, I just wanted to clarify something. You were talking about finding your peers initially. Now I know you've now got a business, and I'm presuming it's worldwide, and we'll go on to talk about that. But finding your peers initially, you mentioned that then the pandemic hit. Were they local to begin with then and in
Oh yeah,
person?
we met at a local hall,
Right.
and yeah, it was in real people doing real things.
So what was really intriguing me there, right? And this is a misconception of mine, because I know you've got a business and you've got a website. And I'm thinking as part of the group we're both a part of, which is digital marketing and different things, that globally, this is really good. And I'm thinking, oh gosh, how many people would be in that scenario? But what I'm hearing now, I'm thinking it wouldn't be that many. And what I'm hearing now is in your local area, you met quite a few people in that scenario. So I'm thinking Is this more common than we realize?
Yes, it is. So the numbers reflect that as well. I think in Canada, we're looking at close to coming up 500,000, or sorry, 50,000 grandparents. UK 200,000.
Wow.
United States 3 million.
Really?
Yeah, Australia it was harder to get stats, but it's about 65,000. And so those are families that have identified themselves on census, that they are the sole guardians of their grandchildren. The numbers are astronomical. They are growing on a daily basis, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One of the reasons is that the social agencies, the governments, the people who make decisions to place children and in some cases fund that, know that the investment that they would make in our situations and our caring for the children produce far better outcomes for the child and therefore for society and therefore the costs that are incurred by society, which with people who are not who struggle. So from a financial basis for the social agencies and the governments who are looking at the dollars, they have their metrics and what are the outcomes. I try not to think too much about us being a financial decision to the government, but I know we are. But the proof is in the pudding. The studies show over and over that the outcome for children raised by grandparents rather than the foster system are astronomically and mind-blowingly higher and better for the children. And for me, it's for the children. The other reason that it's growing so much is that the opioid crisis, it continues to grow and continues to wreak havoc on our young people and on those that live with addictions or are introduced to drugs in a way that they would never have imagined. It's no longer, we all know we know about the opioid crisis. It's no longer smoking a joint and going on with your day. Very quickly, so many families, so many young people and older people, but young people are impacted by this despite what their family upbringing was. And once you're in that cycle and you aren't able to get out, or you're working towards getting out of that addiction, you are not capable to be an effective parent. And therefore, the numbers of children needing this care is growing. And it's both are sad tales, aren't they? So.
Mm. And when I'm wondering from country to country with regards to the systems, are they all quite similar, have you found? Or
No, I'm not necessarily finding that. Yeah, and that leads us down a political conversation. I'd rather not go down. Not country. Some countries are better at taking care of their people than others are, and there are not necessarily systems in place in all countries. So a lot of the grandparents who are raising their grandchildren are doing it on an informal basis. There might not be contracts in place and agreements in place, which is very tenuous and unsettling, not just for the grandparents, but for the children ultimately, because that there isn't that sort of final. So yes, there's differences and it's probably best not to discuss those. Yeah.
and with regards to obviously during the pandemic, lots changed and a lot more went online in lots of areas. And I was working in the corporate world, and the business that I was employed from at that time was a big Fortune 500 American company, and they changed the way they did business. And actually, when they did, it made sense. And I found that I worked in the dental industry, and I found that a lot with dental practices in the UK and whatnot. when that all happened, in kind of a way, it forced it more worldwide for you. What was your biggest surprise as you started to network with more people and find out more people's circumstances?
Well, I think the numbers
Yeah.
was a big surprise. I mean, I knew that, but then to do the research and find out, that was a surprise. Um, so I went and searched out community online, and a lot of Facebook groups are out there, and they are some are managed beautifully, and there's a lot of support and camaraderie and good things happening. Some are managed so poorly that the groups are infiltrated by spammers, hoaxes,
Mm.
um, family members who may not have the best interest of the child in taking screenshots, security, safety. Um, so I knew the value of online community. Those were all typed words. The beauty of that, of course, is you can pop on at any time of the day or night. And usually it's night when everybody's in bed that you can find the time to reach out. And yet folks are flocking away from Facebook now for a number of reasons. And they're flocking away from these large, unmanageable groups. So I looked at blogging and looked at building a community, and I looked at Facebook and I looked at other platforms as well. And I landed on a platform that offers those things that Facebook can't. And the very nature of Facebook and the changing algorithms and the changing rules. I mean, we've just seen a whole other change happen in the last few weeks. Um, it's not a safe place to be. And so I built a community where um, folks can come and know that they're safe and they're heard by those who understand, and they can support each other and raise each other up. It is not subsidized or offered government grants from organizations that have their own metrics and their outcomes. They want to see how many people are you impacting before we give you more money, or we'll give you money for the first bit but nothing afterwards. And so I work in the nonprofit or volunteer in the nonprofit world, and I've worked in the nonprofit world, and I know that grants are wonderful, but they come with all sorts of things tied to them. And I wanted this to be self-sustaining. So to be self-sustaining, I invested a lot of my time and expertise, and I have a lot of expertise to build it and to make it, but to sustain it, there needed to be a gateway to do that. And that's what I struggled with the most. And the organization that we are mutually involved with was really helpful in me understanding that in order for this community to be open to everyone, it could be a sliding scale, and it can be pay as you can and be community based in that you pay it forward when you can pay it forward. There's a free component to it, and there's a tiered component. And because of that, I'm able to use software that allows for group conversations, video conversations. It allows for webinars that I can record and keep in our archives as references and material that people can go back to over and over. It offers that security. There's the two-factor logging in. It's the possibility of hacking is greatly reduced from a platform compared to a platform that is free. It's nothing
Yeah.
free. You pay through your nose to use Facebook. Um, and and it also offers the the ability to grow and to become a community. And that's where some of my skills come in, my facilitating skills, my community building skills. And I have tools to engage people in a meaningful way, 24/7,
Well,
anywhere in the world. And so, we've got grandparents all over Canada and United States. We're starting to find reach in Australia and otherwise. We're all on different time zones. And it's lovely that the love and care and support that we can give each other can happen no matter what time of day. And it can be written and it can be videos and it can be silly memes and it can be a rant. Um, I'm a good example. As I mentioned earlier, we had some challenges specifically in the last 2 weeks, and allows me an avenue to vent in a way that I can't do publicly. And I wouldn't want to. It's disrespectful to my daughter, and it's not, others won't understand like other grand families understand. Um, so, uh,
I absolutely love the
so
name
that's what it
of
is.
it, Grandfamilies. And I've looked at your website and I've seen the tier system. And to give our viewers a little bit of context here, both you and I are members of a group that's absolutely brilliant. It's very ethical. It's a really good education. It's about building a business from your passion. And I've been a member of that group
And a point of service too.
from a point of service, that's really the key component that keeps me part of that group. It's not free. And I've been around that group since July 2020. And that's what has enabled me to do what I've done, the education there, and has enabled me to not give in when things got hard, to write my book, to learn about digital marketing, to keep going, to understand that there's no quick fix, that things take time. And the leader and now leaders of that group are very much bring that message. That's what I love. It's quality. That's what I love about that. And that's how we met, because we're part of a 90-day video challenge, practicing doing videos. It was my third round actually. But that's how we met, and your story just really kind of touched my heart. And I love the name of this, Grandfamilies. I love what you've produced. I love your passion behind it. It's almost like you were made for that. And it's almost like, I mean, I know you already had that and you already had that idea before you joined that group, but it really is coming from your heart. And what I hear a lot there is that safeness. I think that's really key. I'm in the UK and I'll be putting out clips about this as well. And like you said, the vent. I remember when I had my son, my first child, I mean, that's hard enough in and of itself. And I remember not wanting to go out, not wanting to connect with anybody. I had postnatal depression. And my husband, I remember one day saying, Joanne, you really need to go out. You really need to go
Find
out.
yourself a mummy group.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I did. I was fortunate I met mine um, before he was born. And I actually went to the thing I didn't want to go. And I remember how much difference that made. But I also remember I had postnatal depression. I didn't want to take medication because my mum had been schizophrenic. I didn't want to identify with anything that my mum had been. And so what they offered in the area that I was in was 10 weeks support with counselling.
Mhm.
And I remember my group of mummies was 10 people, and I was very open about my postnatal depression. And I found out months and months and months later that a couple of other mums within my group were also going through what I'd been through, but weren't open about it, didn't want to talk about it, but told me that I'd helped them by being open myself. which was
And
really
that's the crux of community, right? You know, you speak to, there's a couple of things I have to speak to the mommy groups and how those are everywhere for new parents. They're
yeah,
not there for
yeah.
grandparents like us. But so we have to build it as opposed to it being funded by whoever does the funding. But it's this the stigma and the stigma busting. So, you know, I'm regularly hearing, oh, they're everywhere. Where are they? Well, they're hidden
And if you're
because
one of those people,
there's
how do you find
shame.
these people?
There's shame, whether it's valid shame or not, it doesn't matter. Shame that you know, society puts shame. Well, if you couldn't raise your child the first time, how can you do it this time?
Oh gosh, I didn't even
You
think of
must be a
that.
bad
As your
parent.
child, the way
Oh
they
yeah.
are.
So there's all this and the stigmas, you know, and I I've lost friendships over this, in that my friends simply can't relate to what I was going through, and I vented to the wrong people.
Yeah,
So I vented to my friends who couldn't understand and ultimately stood in judgment
yeah. You've been through a
of
fire.
something I was processing, right? And in addition to that, I go to the school to pick up my grandson, and there's the mummy lineup, and they're all very nice to me, but I'm not one of them. And then there's the grandma lineup, and they're all very nice to me, but I'm not one of them. Who
And
am
then
I?
the childcare line, even do you know?
You know, who am I, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I do want to talk about the book thing too, because I like to write and I have interesting stories to tell. I was really encouraged to write a book. You should write a book. You should write a book. You should write a book. And I went, okay, I'm going to write a book. And so I started that process of writing a book and doing research. Okay, what does it mean to write a book? What's involved with writing a book? And then the algorithms started kicking in and they're saying, well, you know, write a book and it's part of your course. Well, I, I, I don't want to do a course. I just want to write a book. And then that's when I stumbled on this community that helped me. I knew who I wanted to serve. That was very clear. I knew exactly who I wanted to serve. Um, but how to serve was identified through the processes of this training. It wasn't a book. It wasn't a course. It was building community. And then how do you build community? And you know, will there be a course? Maybe one day. Will there be a book? Probably. Is there right now a community? Because that's what will feed people's hearts. That's a gift I can give to the world. That was the right choice. But there was a process to find that.
Mhm.
And I am forever in debt for the processes that I went through and the self-discovery that I went through to understand how I can take what's here and give it to the world in a way that they are able to receive it. And and you know, make the world a kinder, more gentle place and raise up beautiful humans. And even despite being in our 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s.
Yeah. Oh God.
Imagine that.
Oh,
Imagine that.
there's been quite a few moments where I've had a bit of a jaw dropping because I'm a young grandparent. I'm 55. And like I said, those 10 weeks were intense. Oh my God, they were amazing, right? But
Mhm.
they were intense. And I'm 55. Good grief.
Mhm.
What about if this happened at 75?
Mhm.
Oh my gosh. Now that is because that brings all sorts of questions. How long can I be in this child's life as well?
What's next for the child? How do I fund this?
Yeah.
How do I take care of myself? How do I get on the floor and get back up again when I'm playing blocks with a baby?
How much energy have I got? Yeah.
You know, those are and that's you know, for folks that are I'm able to get up and down off the floor.
Yeah. And also
But I'm not coaching
people
soccer.
they might be widowed. And then God, we could go on forever. You
Yeah.
talked about the safety that brought up all sorts. So, I mean, and so many things will be going through viewers' minds, and somebody might know somebody. They'll find you at, is it grandfamily.com?
World.com.
I'll put it in the description below
Yeah.
the video.
Grandfamilyworld.com. And when you get there, you'll find a couple of things. One is direct link to the community and how to become part of the community. You will also get a direct link to my public blog, which is available to anybody who wants to read my profound words, and subscribe to the newsletter and that, etc. And then there's also a direct link to helping people discover the opportunities of digital business, whether that's in their older years or not. So there's three things they'll find at Grandfamily World. The most important, in my opinion, is not my blog with all my words. The most important is the community. That's where my heart is, and that's what I am so inspired to see grow on a weekly basis. And I'm so inspired to know that I'm touching the lives. Sorry, my community is touching the lives. Sorry, our community is touching the lives of grandparents. It's not mine, it's theirs. Yeah.
So, I would imagine that you've changed and grown a lot along the way in yourself, and you've learned a lot. And I would imagine you're a different version of yourself, having come through this journey. What would you say has been the biggest learning for you?
Biggest learning for me. Um, is that biggest learning for me would be that I can question myself and my professional experience, and I have a diverse and interesting professional experience, and I can question, what does the end of my uh, work life look like, and discover that there's plenty left inside of me to give to the world, and that I have value, and those, you sort of get beaten up at the end of your work career. And I had a position I was so excited to be in, and so I felt so um, sure that that would be where I would retire from eventually. And that did not work out um, as I understood it to be. And that was very disappointing. It's like, okay, so I am not of use to the world. And it turns out I'm a I'm of use to the world, and the world needs me. And even if I just touch 100, 200, 300 families, my work is done. Like, I don't know, my work is done, but I've made a difference.
Like
And that's really important to me. That's what's most important to me, is
like
that
you're leaving. Do you know, it's really interesting because this time last year in the community that we're in, we did this challenge for 90 days. It was different.
pardon me.
Now. And in that challenge, I discovered quite a few people in the community. It's for all ages, and it's for males, females, and what of lots of different backgrounds. And but what I discovered that last year was there was a growing number, particularly of women, who were wanting, including me, who were wanting to bring something to the world in later years and had something to bring, despite that society leading us on this path to retirement. I discovered that. And I just heard that with you there. The other thing I heard as you told your story was, I think, and I might not be right, it's just what I heard in between everything. You learned how to overcome judgment of others and be more true to yourself and sure in yourself.
Yeah, for sure. People will form opinions of you, and they will say things, do things, think things, and yeah, just let them.
Yeah.
It's okay.
That's their stuff. And as long as you
That's their stuff. Yeah,
are,
exactly. Exactly. And I will I hear that. I will let it go, and I will um grow from that. So
I'm
yeah,
quite spiritual, I got chills as you said that. And I would imagine that's also enables you to be less judgmental and more curious of other people's journeys.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Can I read a little quote to you?
go for it.
So this has been something that's been part of my world for 20, 25 years, 30 years. It's the signature line on my emails, and it's attributed to Ralph Waldo Emerson, but there's discussion whether it really was attributed. It really was his words, or paraphrased or taken, but it goes: to laugh often and much, to win the respect of intelligent people and the affection of children, to earn the appreciation of honest critics and endure the betrayal of false friends, to appreciate beauty, to find the best in others, to leave the world a little better, whether by a healthy child, a garden patch, or a redeemed social condition, to know even one life has breathed easier because you have lived. That is the meaning of success.
Wow. Wow. Oh my gosh. Gonna have to clip that one out, tell you.
It's a gooder.
I've
It's and
heard
literally has
it.
been on the bottom of my emails, my email signature, business emails, personal emails
Mm,
for since last century.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you're certainly living that, Mary. So I ask the same two questions of every guest that I have. So I'm going to ask them of you now. And for these two questions, I'd like you to think in the wider aspect beyond Grandfamily World. So, and think about your life as general. So, if you were to go back to a version of you in the past, any version, anywhere along your journey, and you were to give yourself some words of wisdom, where would you go and what would you say?
Uh, where would I go? Um, Probably to the time when times the decades that I was actively parenting my children,
Mm,
and tell my young self that there are some things that really matter when you're parenting, and some things that um, really don't matter.
mm,
And that what you're doing is great. Stay the course. Don't question yourself. Follow your intuition, and know that there are some things that are out of your control. And particularly if you have a child with special needs, you work with the system and you empower that child to be everything that they can be, because they will be a powerful adult one day. And so I think that's what I would tell my little little self as I was um,
You're giving
trying to raise children and figure it out, especially when they were all teenagers, right at the same time. So yeah.
you're giving me chills again. And the last question is, if you could just impart one gem of wisdom to the viewers, it was just one thing that you could say, paying forward from your own journey, what would you say?
Did you say painful words from
Oh,
my?
paying forward. So
Oh,
something
pay it forward words. Okay. Sorry, I misunderstood. It's like I don't really want to share
paying forward.
pain.
So what would you pay forward from your own journey?
um, that you have value.
Yeah.
You have so much to shine into the world, and um, keep shining. Give, give,
I
give.
could have done with hearing that one about a year ago,
Mhm.
because I only realized I had value from my own journey um, not so long ago. And I think a lot of people, if they could receive that, it's really, really valuable. really valuable. I didn't realize what I was saying there. So thank you, Mary. It's been such a pleasure to have you on here.
Well,
And
thank you for inviting me. I feel the same. I was very nervous coming on.
I told you,
Um,
I said to you, you're going to be fine.
and yeah, and keep, I can only encourage you to carry on shining your light into the world, because you too are making a difference, and all of us do in whatever way we can, and let's make it a better world, a kinder, gentler world, to raise
Yeah.
our children, to raise our grandchildren, right? So yeah.
And I just want to add something. It's just unusual. It just came to me that ever since, as an entrepreneur, I decided or realized something that I'd known all along deeply, that all I wanted to do was serve and create something from a heart in service. Life has been so much more fulfilling and so much better when money wasn't at the front of my decisions. And then what's really ironic about that is it doesn't follow straight away, but eventually the money follows.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all have to live in the world, and yeah. So
Thanks, Mary. Thank you.
thanks, Joanne. I really appreciate it.